So we're going to talk a little bit about landlord-tenant complaints. I get a lot of phone calls about this daily from prospective management business. I have landlords that will call in and want to know how the process works, and they have many questions about what they need, how long it will take. And so I just kind of wanted to briefly go over how the legal system works. First and foremost.
And if you would, thank you, Adrian, if you would explain to everyone the difference between the eviction, explain what an actual eviction process is from start to finish.
So, first and foremost, a landlord-tenant complaint is frequently confused with an eviction. A landlord-tenant complaint is the first step. It could lead to an eviction, but they're not the same. So say you have a tenant and they are either abusing the property or breaching the lease in any other way. The most common is not paying rent. They have rent in arrears. Okay. The first way to start to deal with that within the parameters of the law is to go to district court and file a landlord-tenant complaint. Okay. Once you do that, you have you usually get a hearing, 10 to 15 business days. You'll have your day in court. At that time, you want to bring all your evidence to court with you. Oftentimes, the tenants actually, in my experience, don't show up, but sometimes they do. When they do, you have a hearing. And sometimes even when they don't, you have a hearing, but traditionally, you'll get a default win if they don't show up. But again, either way, the first step is a landlord-tenant complaint. Once you go to court, let's just say you have all your evidence lined up, everything's organized, and they judge in your favor, they make a decision, a determination, you get a judgment. From that point on, you have a judgment. You don't have possession. Once you get the judgment, you have to wait another 10 business days. On the 11th business day, if you still are owed money, the amount that's in the judgment that you got a judgment for, then you can return to district court and file for possession.
So it's two filings, not one.
Two.
So for a landlord or property management company filing, they're paid once for the landlord-tenant complaint, then they have to file again for the possession.
Correct. And you still don't have possession even at the second filing. What happens then is they will get the constable or the sheriff. They will post on the door. And from that point, the tenant has roughly another 10 to 15 business days, all depending on the constable and the sheriff's schedule. And within that time frame, if they pay, they can stay. PA is a pay and stay state. So if your judgment is not for performance and it's simply for rent in arrears, they pay it, they stay. That's how it works.
That's how it works, the pay and stay. And that is a good question. You've been handling a lot more landlord-tenant complaints for the last several years for me. So what are we seeing most? If I'm correct, it's still probably 95% non-payment of rent is what ends up for landlord-tenant.
Yeah, it's mostly non-payment. And to be honest, I tried very, very hard to avoid going to landlord-tenant court because it is a very different animal since COVID. And, you really need to have your information straight. And so what I mean by that is a lot of new business that we acquire requires me to go to landlord-tenant court. These landlords are calling us because they're in trouble. They don't know how to navigate the legal system and they need to take the tenant out. Or they like to take the tenant out because the tenant's not paying. In these situations, it's very, very difficult because a lot of these landlords do not have their records organized. Some of them don't even have signed leases.
It's funny you should mention that. I just recorded a video this morning saying the easiest thing to do is move in, move out inspections prior to, and how many landlords just don't do it. And so you are correct. I think it's that. Following up with that should have, could have, would have, a lot of landlords are just regular people. They're just regular people with regular jobs. They are not professional investors.
Yes.
So that being said, you made a very good point. We don't want to go to court. Filing a landlord-tenant complaint is typically, hopefully, the last thing we're doing for non-payment of rent. What how have you found communicating like with tenants to get them to communicate better with us, that they're understanding that if they communicate better with us, they get more opportunity to right the situation?
So I can tell you, I had two instances where these landlords that came in were not organized, and I needed to take a more creative approach to removing the tenants. And honestly, it was just being able to sit at a table with them and explain to them in a very human manner what the circumstances are, what the end looks like, and how we get there. It's really about you know what path would you like to take, because at this point your situation, your financial situation is not changing. It is unfortunate, and it's not changing. You can't afford to live here. You are so far in arrears at this point. What can we do?
What can we do?
Let's come to a compromise. And I did this with two units, and we went into court, and we told the judge what we planned to do, and we were able to come to a conclusion. I let the tenant tell us what their end date would be. And, we both discussed that it needed to be a reasonable time frame for the landlord and them, since they were not paying rent.
Right.
And because, I feel as though because we sat down and had a very real human, conversation, and in a very sensitive way, because guys, at the end of the day, is this a business? Yes, it's a business for us. These tenants, this is their home. They've made a home here.
It's
so
personal.
There's a very fine line of coming in with, pointing fingers and where's my rent and where's my this. The last thing you want is someone chasing at your heels and treating you like garbage when you're already struggling. I'm sure that if you were able to pay the rent, we wouldn't be here right now.
Andrew, I will say you've gotten the benefit of coming into my environment after having skinned my knees quite a few times. I was 15 years ago when I was first going to court. It was me against them. I was angry for non-payment. I took it very personally. It was professional, but I was there to win. Now I am here to protect my client.
Yes.
I'm here to protect the client. And it's interesting. One of the reasons that you've been such a huge asset to our organization is your ability to talk to people. And one of the biggest fears for landlords is when they're moving somebody out or evicting, right? Even if they're helping them move out, is will they damage the property on the way out? How have you seen? We don't really deal with that. How have you seen your approach of guidance out of the property versus pushing people out of the property?
I haven't had any issue. I had one time, I'm going to be honest, one time there was one set of tenants that, the property was already not in the best of shape, and they left and they were angry. And I believe, I kind of came in on the tail end of that. So there was a lot of back and forth. They didn't want to leave. And so I do believe that situation could have been handled differently, but it wasn't my say. And I have to support our clients. And I do believe, hindsight, what they say about hindsight, it's 2020. I do believe our client learned something too, that, at the end of the day, it is, what is your goal? And putting your goal before your ego.
Yeah, good point.
That's a really big one. And I think my years in management, working in restaurants, bumping elbows with people in all walks of life. And me too, I'm human. I have my ups and my downs. And, I have been very successful with being able to connect with these people in a meaningful way and explaining to them, I'm just like you. I get it. How can I help you? So I'm going to keep it real with you. This is going to come to an end. And it does stink. And I'm sorry that this is happening, but we got to process this.
How can we work together?
Like, let's process the fact that this is going to end. Let's connect in a few days. Okay, now let's talk about how is the best way for you to move forward. And they're like, okay, I really think by such and such time that I can do this, blah, blah, blah. Take another day or two, think about it. Now get back to me. Let me know for sure. We'll make this an agreement. Sign, seal, deliver. I promise you, between now and then, I'm not going to bother you.
Yeah, that's their thing too.
You don't need it.
They're waiting for the constant calls. I mean, we don't do that. We don't drive to properties and knock on doors. We don't show up we're not calling your place of employment. No. We don't do that. That's if you're in collections, that's collections behavior.
And noted, okay, you can get in a lot of trouble for that. That's considered harassment. So that's important to note for those that are self-managing. If you have a savvy tenant that knows this, they could file a complaint on you.
And remember, as you and I both know now, it's not about winning. It's just about creating the issue. So someone can file a complaint knowing full well they're not going to win, but you're still getting dragged into it. And what's the line I always say? The fastest way to win an argument is
not to have one.
Not to have one in the first place. So the 15 year ago, the younger, more braggadocious Chris, I saw, now I realize, like to escort someone out of the property in a clean, easy manner that is not punitive is the best way to handle it. And more often than not, I've seen you use these same skills where you'll explain to someone like, hey, if you do A and B to help get this rent paid, we'll save having to file in district court. And that's just going to save you money because on average, what are we paying on average right now for filings?
All depends. So that varies from district court and how many people are in, but anywhere between $150 to $250.
Yeah, $150 to $250. And some courts, some judges are okay with you charging that on the tenant's ledger. Some don't want to see it. They call it a cost of doing business. And so for what I've seen you do, is get into the tenant's head to understand that, hey, we're trying to help you save money. If you can help us find this money somewhere to get it in by a certain date, if we don't have to file, that's an automatic you just made $150, $250. And I've seen tenants they don't see it that way. All of a sudden it flips like, oh wow, you're right. I'm actually saving money by solving this problem with you. Working with one of the things that has been great with having you on board is the fact that you are very, very good at guiding them to understanding that the end is coming. Now, first and foremost, what do we really want to do? We don't want to ever be in landlord tenant.
Ever.
So the fastest way, the best way for us to prevent that is how?
It is screening. We screen it like we mean it.
We screen it like we mean it. Say it again one time for the camera.
Screen it like we mean it.
We screen it like we mean it. It's so true. So there you go. There are some tips that we do. It's, the landlord tenant complaint. When you get to court, technically that is like the last place you should be. And it's not a sign of failure, but it just means that you've reached an impasse with a tenant. And that will happen. You could be the greatest landlord ever. There are going to be situations where you end up in court. But putting yourself in a good position to prevent problems is your best. Any closing notes or thoughts?
Yes. I believe, that oftentimes property management is underestimated, maybe. And I think for the busy professional who wants to get into investment properties, I believe it is the oldest and number one way to create wealth, generational wealth. And, if you are busy and this is not your full-time job to learn, breathe, and just live property management every day, connect with a property manager. Even if it's not us, do your homework, connect with them, because it could save you a lot of time and headache. And, this is your biggest investment. Okay. We're talking about a lot of money. And so if you're going this far, why not go the extra mile to make sure that it's done well? Just done right. And that's what we do here. We're not, oftentimes we're in the expense column. And like you said, Chris, when people call us, they're not calling us when things are going great. If they're going great, right? Why would I hire a property manager, right? You're calling me because now you're in landlord tenant court, or you're heading there. You don't know how to do it. You don't know what to expect. And now, you're if
Frustration.
you would have called it beforehand, you likely wouldn't be here. We're, every now and again we catch a hanger, but our systems, they work. They work really, really well. So save yourself time and energy, because oftentimes we actually make you way more money than you even knew that you could make, because we're professionals.
It's true. You don't know what you don't know, and that's where you end up losing. All right, good topic, which reminds me, we'll say that for the next one is going to be how we actually make clients money. That's a good topic.